Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm 30 years old, though most people mistake me for someone in their early 20s. For the past few years, I've been dealing with severe chronic back pain that makes it hard for me to get around without a cane. I can't lift anything over 10 pounds, and my autism makes it challenging to function when I'm overwhelmed. Add severe anxiety to the mix, and you've got a recipe for disaster in stressful situations. My journey with this pain has been a long and frustrating one. I've seen countless doctors, tried every treatment imaginable short of surgery, but we still don't know what's causing it. The pain got so bad that I had to leave my job of 5 years when the pandemic hit. Since then, I've been relying on public health insurance, which made it difficult to find a physical therapist in my area. Finally, after a year of searching, I found a therapist who accepted my insurance. I was excited for my first appointment, hoping it would be the start of some relief. Little did I know it would lead to one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. The day of my appointment, my car decided to act up and my family was too busy to give me a ride. So I had to take the bus. The appointment itself was tough. They were stress testing to see my limits, which left me in more pain than usual. On the way home, I was exhausted and hurting, but at least I had a seat on the crowded bus. That's when she got on. A woman in her 50s or 60s, who I can only describe as a Karen. She scanned the bus, saw no empty seats, and then her eyes locked onto me. I could feel the judgment radiating off her as she stomped over. Karen yelled at me to get up and give her my seat. I tried to explain that I couldn't because I had just had a physical therapy appointment and was in a lot of pain. She accused me of lying, saying I was too young to have any real problems, and that I was just pretending to be disabled for attention. I was shocked. I tried to explain my situation again, telling her about my chronic back injury and why I had the cane. I said I really couldn't stand for the next 20 minutes, but Karen wasn't having any of it. She called me a liar, insisting I was too young to have anything serious. Before I could react, she grabbed my cane and threw it to the back of the bus. She yelled at me to stop pretending and get up. I was mortified. Without my cane, I couldn't even stand up properly. The pain combined with the humiliation was overwhelming. I started shaking, feeling tears well up in my eyes. Karen then accused me of claiming disabilities for drug money, calling me a useless junkie. She threatened to report me to the state for fraud. At this point, I just wanted to disappear. I decided to try and make my way to the back of the bus to retrieve my cane, using the seats for support. But as I struggled to my feet, a wave of pain shot through my back. My legs gave out and I fell forward onto my face. Karen shouted that I was attacking her. To my horror, she kicked me in the side as I lay there. She demanded that I be thrown off the bus and arrested. Everything after that is a bit of a blur. I was in tears, overwhelmed by pain and humiliation. But then, something unexpected happened. Other passengers started standing up, some to help me, others to confront Karen. One passenger asked Karen what was wrong with her, pointing out that I was clearly in pain. Another told her to leave me alone, saying she was the one who should be thrown off. Someone brought my cane back to me, and I clutched it like a lifeline. The bus driver had come over, joining the chorus of voices defending me. Eventually, 2 passengers dragged Karen off the bus, even as she continued to screech about how I was faking everything. Once Karen was gone, the driver knelt beside me. She asked if I was okay, if I needed to go to the hospital, or if we should call the police. I was a mess, just repeating "I'm sorry" over and over. I felt terrible for causing such a scene. I apologized for all the trouble and offered to find my own way home. But the driver assured me that I hadn't done anything wrong. She said that Karen was the one who had been disruptive and violent, and that she wouldn't let her back on the bus no matter what. The driver was incredibly kind. She called my mother to come pick me up at the next stop. As we waited, other passengers came to check on me, offering words of support and comfort. When my mom arrived, she was furious about what had happened. She thanked the driver profusely and got the information about the bus's dash cameras in case we decided to press charges. Despite one person's cruelty, so many others had stood up for me. It was quite the reminder that invisible disabilities are often misunderstood, but also that there are good people willing to help when it really matters. I've always been a bit of an introvert, especially since I was diagnosed with autism in my teens. As I've gotten older, my salt and pepper beard and confident demeanor often lead people to ask me for help or advice, even in places where I don't work. It happens most frequently at the liquor store, usually when I'm helping my parents shop for wine. To manage my sensory sensitivities, I invested in a pair of high-end noise-canceling headphones, Bowers & Wilkins P9 and Signature Premium. They're not cheap, but they're worth every penny for the peace they bring me in public spaces. One evening, I decided to pick up some wine for myself. As usual, I had my trusty headphones on, which usually deter people from approaching me. I was browsing the aisles, comparing different bottles, when I noticed a woman with bleach blonde hair and a sour expression wandering around the store. I didn't think much of it and continued shopping. When I was examining some Chardonnay, I heard a faint sound through my headphones. I looked up and saw the woman looking at me expectantly. Thinking I might be in her way, I raised an eyebrow and moved along. I continued shopping, picking up a few bottles of cava for an upcoming family event. Suddenly, I felt someone far too close behind me. Before I could react, my headphones were yanked off my head and clattered to the floor. The sudden noise of the store was jarring and my ears were ringing from the impact. I turned around to see the blonde woman glaring at me. She started yelling at me, calling me an idiot and demanding that I help her immediately. She accused me of ignoring customers and insisted that I stop ignoring her. Confused and startled, I asked her why she was yelling and why she had hit me. She responded angrily, saying I deserved it for ignoring her. I tried to explain that I didn't work there, but she refused to believe me. She threatened to get me fired and demanded to speak to my manager, ranting about my supposed incompetence and asking if I knew who she was. By this point, a crowd had gathered, including some actual employees and 2 police officers who happened to be nearby. They had been dealing with some homeless people outside and came in to investigate the commotion. As the initial shock wore off, I realized my expensive headphones might be damaged. I started looking around for the pieces that had scattered on the floor. This seemed to enrage the woman even more. She threatened to hit me again if I didn't pay attention to her. She raised her hand to slap me again, but before she could, one of the police officers grabbed her wrist. The woman started to yell at the officer, but he quickly identified himself and told her that she was under arrest for assault and disorderly conduct. He warned her not to resist arrest. The woman's tone changed immediately, switching from angry to pleading. She tried to accuse me of assaulting her and even claimed I had attempted to sexually assault her. The officer calmly told her they would review the security footage and reiterated that she was under arrest. The police took her to their cruiser while the other officer took my statement. After reviewing the security footage, it was clear that she had assaulted me unprovoked. Unfortunately, my headphones were indeed damaged, and a crucial piece was missing. The officers advised me that I could sue her for the value of the headphones if she wasn't willing to pay for them. I approached her as she sat handcuffed in the squad car. I explained to her that she had broken my headphones and that she would need to replace them. She dismissively asked about the cost. When I told her they were $1,000 plus tax, she exploded, calling me crazy and refusing to pay. And that's where things stand now. I'm taking her to small claims court for the cost of replacing my headphones. The officer assured me that with a police report backing up my claim, I'm almost guaranteed to win. However, it might take a year or more before the court date. In the meantime, Karen is being charged with felony assault and disorderly conduct. The police said I probably won't have to testify against her, as the video evidence is pretty damning. It's been a wild experience, and I'm still processing everything that happened. But one thing's for sure, I'm not backing down. Those headphones are my lifeline in public spaces, and I'm determined to get them replaced one way or another. My wife and I moved to this area 3 years ago when we found out we were expecting twins. We wanted a safe place with good schools and a family-friendly atmosphere. About 6 months after we moved in, our twins were just learning to walk, and we'd take them out to play in our fenced backyard. That's when we first noticed the dirty looks from our neighbors. At first, I brushed it off as nothing, but things quickly escalated. One day, while I was pushing my kids on the swings, a group of neighbors approached me. One of them asked me to keep it down, claiming that some of them were trying to enjoy their peaceful afternoons. I apologized, but explained that the kids were just playing and weren't being particularly loud. Another neighbor chimed in, saying it was disturbing their zen and that they had moved here for peace and quiet, not to listen to screaming children all day. I was taken aback by their hostility, but I tried to be diplomatic. I told them I understood their desire for peace, but explained that kids need to play outside as it's important for their development. A third neighbor dismissed my explanation, suggesting that we should consider moving to a more family-oriented neighborhood. That's when I realized this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. These people genuinely didn't want children around. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more and more neighbors joining what they called the Kid-Free Neighborhood Alliance. They started holding meetings and putting up flyers about preserving neighborhood tranquility. Things got really weird when they began staging meditation circles on their front lawns whenever kids were outside playing. Picture a group of adults sitting cross-legged, humming loudly, and glaring at any child who dared to laugh or shout while playing. One day, I was approached by a frazzled-looking woman pushing a stroller. She asked if I was also experiencing problems with the alliance. I confirmed that I was and mentioned how ridiculous it was getting. I started to introduce myself, but she quickly cut me off, warning me not to use names as they might be listening. She then told me about how the alliance had been making their lives miserable and asked if I had heard about the playground. When I asked for clarification, she explained that the alliance was petitioning the city to have it removed, claiming it was an attractive nuisance that was lowering property values. But it got worse. The alliance started filing noise complaints against families for the most absurd reasons. One family got a citation because their toddler sneezed too loudly while playing in their own backyard. The final straw came when I was served with a lawsuit. The papers claimed that my children's laughter was disturbing the peace and causing emotional distress to the alliance members. I was furious and questioned how they could sue us for our kids being happy. My wife agreed that it was insane, but emphasized that we needed to fight this and not let them bully us out of our home. We decided to reach out to other families in the neighborhood, and we quickly realized we weren't alone. Many had been facing similar harassment but were too afraid to speak up. We formed our own group, the Family-Friendly Neighborhood Association, to fight back against the alliance's ridiculous demands. But the alliance wasn't backing down. They escalated their tactics, and that's when things got really weird. We started noticing an unusual number of raccoons in the neighborhood, specifically targeting yards with children's toys. At first, we thought it was just a coincidence, until one night when I caught one of the alliance members, let's call her Karen, sneaking around our yard with a bag of dog food. When I confronted her about what she was doing, she tried to claim she was just feeding the local wildlife and that it was important to care for nature. I pointed out that it was 2 a.m. and she was in my backyard. Flustered, Karen finally admitted defeat and revealed their plan, calling us child-having monsters and threatening that if we wouldn't leave willingly, they would make us leave. It turned out Karen had been training the local raccoons to raid yards with toys, hoping to drive families out with a constant mess and potential health risks. It was both ridiculous and dangerous. We called an emergency meeting of our association and decided it was time to take action. We gathered evidence of the alliance's harassment, including video of Karen's raccoon training escapades, and took it to the local authorities and media. The story exploded. News vans descended on our quiet suburb, and suddenly the alliance's actions were exposed for all to see. They tried to spin it as protecting property values, but nobody was buying it. The lawsuits against us were thrown out, and several alliance members, including Karen, faced charges for harassment and reckless endangerment. Turns out, training wild animals is illegal. Who knew? In the aftermath, most of the alliance members either moved away or, shockingly, had a change of heart. Some even apologized, admitting they'd gotten caught up in a mob mentality. Now, a year later, our neighborhood is truly peaceful, not because it's kid-free, but because we've learned to coexist. The playground is still here and kids play freely. Our twins are in kindergarten now and they love playing with the neighborhood kids, including, believe it or not, Karen's grandchildren who come to visit her every weekend. Life has a funny way of working things out sometimes. I've known Margaret for over 5 decades, and let me tell you, that woman never ceases to amaze me. We've been through thick and thin together, but nothing quite compares to the spectacle I witnessed with her grandson. Margaret's always been generous, but she's no fool. She worked hard for her fortune, and she's always believed in the value of earning one's way. That's why it pained her to see her only grandchild turn into such an entitled brat. One day, over our weekly game of bridge, Margaret confided in me. Her eyes twinkled with mischief as she told me she thought it was time to teach her grandson a lesson. She told me about her plan to change her will, leaving most of her money to charity. I was skeptical at first, worried about how her grandson might react. But Margaret was determined. She insisted that her grandson needed to learn, and she had a feeling he might try something foolish. Oh, how right she was. Within days of announcing her decision, strange things started happening. Margaret would call me, chuckling about mysterious appointments she'd never made or old friends she couldn't recall. She'd laugh, telling me it was her grandson, thinking he could trick her into believing she was losing her mind. I have to admit, I was impressed by Margaret's acting skills. She played the part of a confused old lady to perfection. Her grandson thought he was pulling the wool over her eyes, but little did he know Margaret was always 2 steps ahead. As the weeks went by, Margaret's stories got wilder. She'd tell me about changing her will to leave everything to her cat, Mr. Whiskers, or the mailman, or her hairdresser. Each time I'd ask if she was sure about this game she was playing, but Margaret was having the time of her life. She'd remind me, dear Esther, that she hadn't had this much fun since we crashed that governor's ball in '62. The coup de grace came when Margaret invited a group of us over for tea. She timed it perfectly, just as her grandson was about to make his final move with some forged documents. I'll never forget the look on that boy's face when he walked in and saw us all there, laughing and placing bets on what he'd try next. Margaret revealed everything, how she'd known about his scheme all along, how she'd been playing him like a fiddle. When she announced that she was leaving half her fortune to charity and the other half to all the people her grandson had hired to con her, I nearly spat out my tea from laughing so hard. As her grandson stormed out, red-faced and humiliated, Margaret called after him about his small allowance. Then she turned to us, a triumphant smile on her face. With a raised teacup, she asked who was up for another round of bridge. "That's my friend Margaret for you, sharp as a tack and twice as clever. She may be in her golden years, but she's got more spark than folks half her age. I can only hope that her grandson learned his lesson. But even if he didn't, I know Margaret will sleep well, knowing she did right by her money and gave us all one hell of a show in the process." And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.